Could Mark actually survive in iron lung? Like long-term survival with all the nutrients he needs?
You see, blood transports almost everything the body needs, so you might think to just drink it, but that would have been the end of them.
Instead, I'm gonna show you how the solution relies on this fan and poop. But what's actually going on inside blood? It seems simple, but there's a surprising amount of science behind it, so let's find out. This is blood. And if I drink a glass of this every day, I'll drink 120 milligrams of iron per day, while the recommended is 8 to 18 milligrams per day, which means that I would feel nauseous within 8 weeks. And have the same lifespan as Unes, Anes, 1 year. And this sucks. Oh wait, there you are. You see, fresh human blood contains almost all the nutrients we need.
But the concentrations are a bit off. To get enough of one, you would have killed over from too much of another.
So then the obvious question is, how do we separate them? And this is where this fan comes in handy.
This is milk with red food coloring in it, and it will be our stand-in for blood today. If I spin this for the next 10 minutes, you see right here that the milk would have split into two parts, the milk part and the red food coloring part. The red food coloring is heavier than the milk, so it sinks to the bottom. And this is precisely what happens to blood in a centrifuge, except it splits into three segments: the red blood cells where the iron is, a buffy coat where the white blood cells are, and lastly the blood plasma with a ton of salt. And we'll need all three for Simon to have a chance at survival.
Without water, life cannot exist, which is why we should extract it first.
Blood plasma forms 55% of the total blood volume, and it's 90% water packed with nutrients and a deadly amount of salt. Now we could let the plasma boil and distill it to get pure water,
and they would have been fine for a few weeks, but surprisingly they would have been dropping like flies, because it turns out that there is fat in the plasma
made of molecules called lipoproteins, and these molecules carry with them omega-3 and 6, as well as vitamins A in the form of retinol, vitamin E, some vitamin K1 and 2, and choline in the form of phosphatidylcholine. Distilling them directly would have rendered them useless, which is why we should centrifuge the plasma a second time, and skim the isolated fat layer from the top and store it for later. Once we've done that, we can distill the plasma and voila!
Clean, crisp water. But let me show you something. You see, this is limescale that you've probably seen before, and it's the stuff that is left behind on a faucet or a shower head when the water evaporates. It's basically all the minerals left behind. And it's this white powder that's going to be super important, because after the distillation process, we're also going to end up with a white powder that will be our holy grail. An average person needs around 2 liters of water per day, and for my American viewers, that's about 1.5 bald eagle-shaped water bottles, which means that we would need around 4 liters of blood to get this much water.
We can do similar calculations for all the other nutrients we get from blood plasma, and we see that we need a lot more than just 4 liters. I mean, look at that! We need around 100 liters of blood for omega-6 per person, and that's about 1 bathtub's worth of blood per person. That much blood is way too much to be hand-cracked every day. I mean, just look at me, I'm struggling. Which means that they need to automate it. Which means that they need electricity.
Which means, where would they get their electricity? A dam! That's the answer! By building even a small dam and letting the blood flow through, spinning these turbines, they'd be able to generate enough electricity. They might need a bit more cleaning than a hydroelectric power plant, but they'd have a renewable source of hemoelectric power.
I'm assuming that they can build it since they built a submarine and a damn X-ray machine. It might take a while to construct it, so in the beginning they can build blood wheels instead. And now we need to find a centrifuge that can spin that much liquid.
At first I looked at the world's strongest centrifuge, the Chief 1300 in China. But biggest doesn't always mean strongest.
Blood centrifuging typically starts at 1500 Gs and often requires more force, while the Chief 1300 generates up to 1500 Gs maximum. We'll also need something that can continuously pump blood in while taking each of the components out through separate tubes. This is exactly how industrial cream separators work. They can centrifuge over 500 liters of milk every hour at over 5000 Gs of force and don't require much power. Typically 3 to 15 kilowatts, and our hemoelectric power plant running on a whole ocean would generate hundreds to 1,000 times more electricity per hour than that.
But I left something out before. I didn't show you how much blood we needed for vitamin K.
Because we need more than 2,000 liters for that.
Oh yeah, there's also this other issue, which is that we're consuming too much vitamin A, which means that we have to find a way to get enough vitamin K while reducing our vitamin A intake.
And for this, we need to understand some history. In the late 1850s, a man broke the neck of a swan flask while keeping a similar one intact and let the bone broth inside of the second one boil. Soon, the broken flask became cloudy from microorganisms in the air contaminating and growing in it. And one of these organisms was yeast. For 2,000 years, people believed that life spawned out of dead things. They called it spontaneous generation. And this man, Louis Pasteur, had just proven them wrong with his experiment. He sterilized one flask by boiling it, a process we today call pasteurization, named after Pasteur. And the shape of the swan neck stopped any organisms from reaching the broth, so nothing grew, while the one open to the air did.
What this tells us is that there are organisms all around us, in the air, on our skin, which means that the people of Ireland are carrying with them something other than blood: yeast.
In fact, this is how sourdough starter is made. But as you can see, yeast needs a medium to grow in. Here, it's flour. But what if we turn it into blood instead? Yeast needs a medium containing sugars to ferment and minerals to use as building blocks. The red blood cells we separated earlier carry sugar and iron, and the white powder we got from distilling the plasma has all the minerals the yeast needs. If we mix some of that dry powder in with the remaining red blood cells, then add plasma contributing 80 to 90% of the total volume, we'll end up with a liquid medium that the yeast can grow in. Let's also add the fat layer we skimmed from the plasma to increase the concentration of fats and some vitamins when the yeast absorbs them.
So we'll end up with a mushy medium that the yeast can grow in. But would this actually work? It wouldn't just work, it would be pretty good.
Scientists frequently use blood-based liquid broths as growing mediums. It is often sheep's blood mixed in with nutrients and water.
And yeast is often one that is grown with it. But here's the catch. Yeast needs a warm place to grow, often 20 to 30 degrees Celsius.
And considering that all the cells got snapped out of existence, we gotta find another solution.
So we need to find another heat source. The water can be split into hydrogen and oxygen through a process called electrolysis. And the oxygen can be used by the people and the yeast, while the hydrogen can be used to build a hydrogen fuel cell. This hydrogen fuel cell can use some excess oxygen and the hydrogen, recombine them, and make water again. This water is then introduced back into the electrolysis machine, and the electricity generated by the hydrogen fuel cell also goes into the electrolysis machine up here, which then reduces the load on the hydroelectric power plant by about 45%. On top of that, the hydrogen fuel cell generates heat, which is exactly what we need for our yeast.
Now if we pour the growing medium from before, add the yeast spores collected from skin, and introduce oxygen and heat over a few days, yeast will have grown. But now the yeast needs to be separated from the growing medium, and we do that by transferring them to a centrifuge, separating all the blood and minerals from the yeast, and we'll end up with a cream jam-packed with yeast. Then they'll need to flatten out the yeast cream as much as possible, and dehydrate it at low temperatures for a few hours.
And ta-da! It has something like this. This is nutritional yeast. I've never tried this, so let's try it out. It smells a lot like making bread right now. I don't want to pour too much because something tells me it will not be good. Have it in the spoon. Okay, so I never said it would be good. I mean, so people have said that this should taste like cheese. I am not tasting the cheese. But maybe you're not supposed to take a spoonful of it. Yeah, it's definitely gonna be rough for them, that's for sure.
Here's the thing, they only need 500 to 600 grams of this per day to reach 2,000 calories. And now knowing what it tastes like, I realize that that is a lot more than I expected. But at least they will be packed with all the 9 essential amino acids, all the fiber they need, and it will also absorb the minerals we threw in there, as well as the omega-3, 6, choline, but leaves behind the insane amount of salt and the vitamin A. So that solves our far too much salt and vitamin A problem, but it also doesn't absorb vitamin E and K. Thankfully, we don't need much vitamin E. If they pour on the yeast or drink 12.5 milliliters of Vaskim per day directly, you'd get the max 3000 micrograms of vitamin A and 7.5 to 19 milligrams of vitamin E, which is sufficient. They should also sprinkle on a bit of the dry powder on top of the dry yeast, since some minerals like iodine aren't picked up effectively.
But that still leaves us with one problem, and that's vitamin K. We're still not getting enough of it from the blood nor the yeast.
And to even have a shot at figuring out the solution, we first have to look at vitamin B12. That, until now, has been absent from all their food. As opposed to vitamin A and K, vitamin B12 is water-soluble rather than fat-soluble, which means that it will remain in the watery part of the plasma, which is also where the massive amount of salt is. And because of that salt, you can't just drink it to get the vitamin.
We're gonna have to find another solution.
Before 1926, vitamin B12 deficiency was a massive issue. 1 in 1,000 people have a disease called pernicious anemia, where a person's immune system attacks a protein called intrinsic factor. Without this protein, the body cannot absorb vitamin B12 at all, which inevitably leads to less red blood cells being produced. Up until 1920, a person diagnosed with this illness would die within 1 to 3 years. That was until they found a cure made from liver juice that contains vitamin B12 in high amounts. But the issue with liver juice is that vegans don't want it. So instead, an experiment was done in the 1950s, once again on pernicious anemia patients. Instead of being fed liver juice, they got fed fecal extracts from their own poop.
And miraculously, the volunteers were actually cured of their deficiency.
Now, the running theory for this is that some gut bacteria actually produce vitamin B12, but they produce it in the large intestines, while the body absorbs vitamin B12 at the end of the small intestines in a part called the ileum. And since the small intestines come before the large intestines, the B12 never passes down an area where it can be absorbed. Scientists actually think this is one of the reasons why some herbivores eat their own poop.
Which means that if the people of Ireland do actually manage to extract the vitamin B12 from people's chocolate mousse, then it might not be an issue anymore. And to do this, we need to look at a patent from 1951
labeled Process of Preparing B12 Active Product from Sewage Sludge. And right here is described the method at which B12 is extracted. Heat-dried fecal matter is mixed in with water and heated to 70 degrees Celsius, then stirred and increased to 80 degrees Celsius. It is then let to cool overnight, allowing the solids and liquids to separate. Since vitamin B12 is water-soluble, it will be mixed with the water that rose to the top. There will also be some fats at that level. The mixture is then reheated once again for 5 hours, filtered to get rid of all the chunky bits, and evaporated, leaving a thick syrup behind.
Quick reminder that this is still poop.
So we've sterilized the poop, extracted the vitamin B12 from the proteins it is bound to through the heating process, and concentrated it in a syrup. This method would also extract the vitamin K2, as they are fat-soluble and produced in the gut. We then mix the syrup in with a growing medium for the yeast, fortifying the yeast with vitamin B12, and finally eating the yeast to get all your nutrients. However, there is an issue, which is that yeast cannot absorb vitamin K2, but that can easily be fixed by drizzling a bit of that chocolate syrup on top of the food and you're good. But we're not done yet.
Because we still have 2 vitamins left, vitamin C and D. Let's start with the simpler one, vitamin D.
It is produced by the body when in contact with UV light.
This is a little problematic since all the stars have disappeared.
So instead we need to build a UVB light bulb with a wavelength of 293 nanometers, which is the optimal wavelength for stimulating vitamin D production. Considering that they've built a whole submarine and an ungodly powerful X-ray machine, I think they can figure the light bulb out. According to this paper, exposing 260 square centimeters of the skin surface area to the UVB for 30 seconds at a distance of 5 to 20 centimeters away from the light is enough for a person's daily vitamin D requirements.
How much skin is that, you ask? This much. 1 forearm. You could literally stick your arm out for 30 seconds and you'd win. So that was easy. Now moving on to vitamin C.
During the first centrifuge process, there was one layer that we still haven't used. It's this thin white line that only makes up 1% of the blood volume, called a buffy coat. In it are all the white blood cells that defend the body, and those white blood cells carry with them a high concentration of vitamin C. Tens of millions of years ago, humans lost their ability to produce vitamin C like most other animals, and now we have to eat it, and if we don't, we end up with scurvy in 1 to 3 months. The pirates sure found that one out the hard way.
To get their need of vitamin C, each person has to either drink a can of Coke's worth of buffy coat or pour it over their yeast. And it pains me to say this because it would have fixed the biggest problem in all of this, but we can't just add the buffy coat to the yeast growing medium.
First, the vitamin C is in the white blood cells, which means that we have to break the cell open so that the vitamin C is released in the growing medium, allowing the yeast to absorb it.
But vitamin C is annoying in every way imaginable.
If you've ever bought a high vitamin C skincare product, you might have noticed that it's always in either a highly pigmented glass container or completely opaque.
And that's because it's sensitive to literally everything.
Light, heat, transition metals, oxygen, and pH. We could get rid of the light by enclosing the growing tank, but the tank is full of transition metals like iron. We're continuously pumping oxygen in and heating the mixture to let the yeast grow. It oxidizes through a chain reaction to these two chemicals, dehydroascorbic acid and... What the actual heck is this? I'm trying to learn how to pronounce this thing, and this is how they tell me to pronounce it?
2,3-diketoguLonic acid.
Oh boy, I'm gonna butcher this. 2,3-diketoglonic acid.
By the end of the yeast growing period, it will not just have absorbed a really small amount of the molecule, but it's the wrong type, and it's useless to us.
And that means that we have to store the buffy coat somewhere dark and drink it or add it to yeast before eating.
And that's it. We're done. Everything has been crossed off the list. Right? Prions are an infectious misfolded protein carried by blood, leading to 100% fatal neurodegenerative disease. Oh boy, did I go down a rabbit hole of human diseases. Because up until now, I've been assuming that the blood is basically human blood and carries everything that human blood carries on average. And that includes all the diseases it carries with it.
Like hepatitis A, B, C, D, HIV, and a bunch of other ones. Some of these, like hepatitis C, are mainly found in the plasma.
And they're not drinking that part directly, so we're fine, but they're still relying on the buffy coat for the vitamin C.
And HIV and hepatitis B remain in that part.
Normally, we would solve this by heating it up for a very long period of time to kill all the pathogens.
But we can't because vitamin C is too much of a wuss to handle it. It would be destroyed and useless to our bodies under such heat over a long period of time. But there could be a way to fix this. If we place the buffy coat in a vacuum chamber, remove all the oxygen, then heat it to 70 degrees Celsius, which is where hepatitis C dies, the vitamin C shouldn't be destroyed by the oxidation anymore. But it just so happens that there's an enzyme called ascorbic acid oxidase that converts vitamin C into dehydroascorbic acid even without oxygen, in the temperature range of 20 to 60 degrees Celsius. That means that we need to reach the 72 degrees very quickly without a gradual increase in temperature. To do this, we scorch it like the sun did in the Maze Runner, by flash heating, which is basically going really quickly to a specific temperature over a short period of time. In our case, 70 to 90 degrees Celsius for 15 to 20 seconds. That will denature that enzyme and simultaneously kill almost all pathogens while still keeping the vitamin C active.
Then the vitamin C shouldn't be destroyed by the oxidation anymore. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Who would have thought that this tiny disease is indestructible, incombustible, immovable, and immortal, and no one has heard of them? Well, technically, they're not even alive to die to begin with, but who cares? They're still annoying.
Prions are an abnormal form of protein carried by blood that once inside your bloodstream, they slowly convert other proteins to their dark side and make their way into your brain. From there, they cause holes in your brain's gray matter, kill neurons, and cause a whole list of symptoms, including insomnia, personality changes, and dementia.
Oh yeah, and death is inevitable in as short as 4 months to a year from when symptoms first show.
But the thing about them is that it takes an average of 12 years for symptoms to show, and sometimes even decades, up to 50 plus years.
So while it might not be an immediate death sentence for the adults, the new generation of kids will have an incredibly unreliable and short lifespan.
And the worst thing about them is once they're inside you, that's it, your fate is sealed. You either die by some freak accident or them.
So, is that it? Are the people of Ireland doomed to die not because of a lack of food, but because of a single misfolded protein?
Up until this point in the video, I was genuinely happy that I figured out a reasonable way for survival. I've written the script 5 times, each with new methods, and this was the most promising. So I went back to watching the movie again, and I saw the tree. And it might just be the last minuscule bit of hope left. You know how Simon in the movie is from Eden? Eden being a space station that used to orbit Mars.
There is a big chance that they grew fruits and vegetables there,
seeing as they had humanity's last tree. If one of the captured prisoners had eaten a fruit or vegetable with its seeds, then they could perform an Ellie Sattler and fish the seeds out of their brown domain, then plant those seeds and completely dispose of our need for the buffy coat.
But for this to happen, a few requirements do have to be met.
First, the plant must be rich in vitamin C. Then the plant must be traditionally and widely farmed plant that could be found on a space station. The seeds must be located in the commonly eaten part of the plant. The seeds must be small enough to be swallowed whole so that they stay intact. They also have to be tough enough to survive the digestion process. And lastly, the seeds have to survive inside the fecal matter for a reasonably long enough time for people to extract them out. The first and second criteria immediately rule out fruits like guavas, grapefruits, papayas, and plants like mustard greens and lotus roots, and a bunch more. The third criteria rules out broccoli and basically all leafy greens since their seeds aren't in the edible parts. And the last three criteria might get us to our plant, and in fact many berries and a few fruits do survive this. For instance, kiwis, strawberries, grapes, tomatoes, bell peppers, chili peppers, and cucumbers. Out of these, chili peppers have the highest concentrations of vitamin C, and people do often chomp down on the part with the seeds. If by sheer luck they managed to find one of these seeds, planted it in compost, their own poop, and then let it grow, then their vitamin C problems would be solved, which eliminates their need for the buffy coat completely and all the prions it carries with it. So under these ideal circumstances, and assuming that everything goes perfectly, it is indeed possible to survive. They will need the brightest minds available and very creative engineering, but maybe they can. Let's hope that Scarface over here, Radiation Sponge over there, and the two Wendigos in the back are up for the task. But hey, that's just it. I'm already months late for using this video, so bye bye! I'm also late for the bus!